citation.
Draft cold weather bonus and payments, amendment extension of eligibility, Jersey Regulations 2000. The states make these regulations under Articles 8 and 18 of the Income Support Jersey Law 2007 and Article 4.2 of the Social Security Bonus Jersey Law 2014.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Just to clarify, notwithstanding the current state of play regarding ministers, I do intend to proceed with these regulations because they are simply implementing a decision of the Assembly taken last year, and I don't think they will be controversial. The government provides support with heating costs to low-income families through two separate schemes. Firstly, the Cold Weather Bonus Scheme supports pensioners who do not receive income support but have a low household income. And secondly, cold weather payments are made through the Income Support Scheme and help income support households, which include a pensioner, a young child, or an individual with a high level of disability. Both schemes provide the same level of financial support across the winter period. Members will recall that last year they approved my proposal to maintain for this winter a guaranteed £70 a month payment to eligible households under both schemes running from October to March and notwithstanding variations in temperature. Members also agreed last year to support a proposition from Deputy Corrie to extend eligibility for cold weather support to working age individuals who are receiving an LTIA award at 100% and who live in ineligible low-income households. These regulations extend the eligibility of the two existing payment schemes. Deputy Porrie's amendment proposed an extension to the Cold Weather Bonus Scheme. These regulations go slightly further and also extend the support available through the Cold Weather Payment Scheme in a similar fashion, which is logical. Payments under both schemes will be extended to any eligible household that includes a working age person receiving a 100% long-term incapacity award. If approved, the regulations will support additional payments in respect of January to March 2024 and future winter periods. Sir, I propose the principles.
Are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? No member wishes to speak on the principles. Deputy Porrie.
Thank you, sir. I would just like to take this opportunity to thank the whole Assembly to vote towards this proposition, and also to, I would like to thank the Minister to bringing now to date. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak on the principles? No other member wishes to speak. And I close the debate. Do you wish to respond, Minister?
Sir, I think I just maintain the principles, please.
Those in favour of adopting the principles kindly show. Those against? The principles are adopted. Does the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel wish to scrutinise the matter?
No, thank you, sir.
Very well. Do you propose in second reading?
Sir, may I propose en bloc, please?
Yes. Are they seconded for second reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in second reading? Those in favour of adopting in second reading kindly show. Those against? You propose in third reading, Minister?
Yes, please, sir. I maintain the regulations.
Are they seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Those in favour of adopting in third reading kindly show.
Appeal, please, sir.
The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seat. The vote is in third reading on P99, the cold weather bonus. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their votes, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. And it has been adopted in third reading, 41 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. The Next item of public business is the draft employment amendment number 15, Jersey Law P100, lodged by the same minister. The main respondent will be the chair of the Health and Social Security Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the citation.
Draft Employment Amendment Number 15, Jersey Law 2000, a law to amend further the Employment Jersey Law 2003. The State, subject to the sanction of His Most Excellent Majesty in Council, have adopted the following law.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I would also like to continue with this amendment law. I don't think it's a matter of significant policy, and it is seeking to put into force a recommendation of the Employment Forum made last year, which will be beneficial within our employment framework. So, with that introduction, in May 2023, the Employment Forum published its report into the operation of zero-hour contracts, together with a review of employment protections more widely. The consultation exercise which the Forum undertook revealed situations in which an employee who was usually employed on a zero-hour contract where the number of working hours is not guaranteed was nonetheless consistently working a pattern of regular hours. That would ordinarily merit a different and more stable contractual arrangement between the employee and their employer. The Forum considers, and I agree, that the continuing use of a zero-hour contract when regular hours are being worked is an unfair practice that puts the employee at a disadvantage and needs to be addressed. The overriding interest for many employees is to have as predictable a working pattern as possible, particularly where an employment contract does not provide that level of security. The Forum's recommendation is to give an employee the right to request a variation in their terms and conditions of employment to reflect the actual work pattern which has been established over a given period of time. For example, even if someone is on a 0 hours contract but they are consistently working the hours of 9 to 1, Monday to Friday, they then have an established pattern. This amendment will give the employee the right to request such a change. An employee will be able to ask that their contract is varied to reflect the reality of their working pattern. The Forum has recommended that the working pattern should be evidenced over a significant period of time, being 6 months. This length of time will provide strong evidence and a presumption for a change in contractual arrangements. The amendment also provides that an employee has a right to ask their employer to review a refusal to change the employment contract, to review a refusal to agree a change to the employment contract, and ultimately to make a complaint to the Employment Tribunal. An employer will have a defence to a refusal to agree a variation in the terms of the contract. That defence is closely drawn in the amendment and reflects the fact that, because the employee can demonstrate a consistent pattern of working hours, it will only be in very limited circumstances that the employer can refuse. Sir, I'm also taking this opportunity to propose a second amendment to the employment law. This is a change to the right of an employee to request flexible working arrangements. Currently, an employee may make a request for flexible working arrangements only once in a 12-month period. The amendment increases that to twice in a 12-month period. The COVID-19 pandemic inevitably saw a dramatic increase in the use of flexible working arrangements, whether that be hours, times, or place of work, to enable businesses to continue operating and employees to keep their jobs. Even though we have returned largely to normality, it is clear that the ability to work flexibly continues to be important, if not more so now. As I make clear in my report, flexible working has far wider benefits than the immediate working relationship between an employee and their employer. It contributes to the success of a business, the ability to retain experienced staff, and supports families and the community in creating and maintaining a good work-life balance. Sir, for all these reasons, I commend the proposed amendments to the Assembly and maintain the principles. Thank you.
Right, are the principles seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the principles? No member wishes to speak on the principles. Deputy Sutherland?
Yes, sir. And I rise to thank the Minister for bringing this particular proposition and ask her a question in that, as with lots of benefits. The key to making sure that those benefits are used and obtained is that of sanctions. And my question would be, what sanctions exist now and what sanctions will exist in the future to try and enforce, to ensure that these rights, which are newly acquired, are actually fully endorsed by the employers on the request of the employee.
Deputy Taddy?
Thank you. I think this change is welcome. Could I ask the Minister whether she has come across any cases, I seem to have heard of them, where actually a case has gone to tribunal and an employment contract is offered ostensibly on a 0-hour contract, but actually the tribunal has judged that in practice it is a fixed hour or full-time contract and therefore the 0 hours is disregarded. And if that is the case, could she state, first of all, whether there have been precedents already where simply because one has a 0-hour contract, that doesn't constitute it in law, if in actual fact it is being used otherwise? And will she maybe comment on to what she thinks the extent of that abuse of contract is? Something we might call a sham 0-hour contract, I suspect. Could she also clarify, she did mention in her speech that it's important that employees know that they've got regular working patterns. I would suggest it's probably even more important that they know that they have a regular income. So even if the actual working shift pattern may change, and we know that some workers may vary between earlies and lates and anything in between, and find that they're working different days and different patterns. One of the more important things is to know that they actually can guarantee a fixed income, a minimum income at the end of each month. And will she also explain whether that is going to apply to some of the issues that the sub-panel that Deputy Porre ably chaired to do with workers who come here on a work permit, who often find actually that they haven't got, they've got variable contracts in practice, so they will be brought over to the island on a promise of a certain number of hours a week or a month, but in reality they're actually being given much less hours than they want to, so actually somewhere in between a 0-hour contract and a full-time contract. Does that have any implications for them?
Any other member wish to speak on the principles? If no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. If the deputies don't mind, I will try and answer those questions in reverse. Firstly, Deputy Taddy's question about work permit holders. I believe it is a rule that when someone comes here on a work permit, they are guaranteed 40 hours a week, and that the contract must be for 40 hours. And if an employer was to reduce those hours, then they are in breach of the work permit regulations. I'm afraid that particular aspect sits more closely elsewhere than with me. So, but my understanding is that the situation the deputy is suggesting is not one that should happen at all, and it's not necessarily an employment law matter. The question of guaranteed income, I think that really is a matter between the employer and employee. I think if the employer and the employee, they may decide to... 0 hours contracts, I think, can take various forms. The report, my recollection of the Employment Forum report was that they had not identified significant abuse of 0 hours contracts, and they suggested this was one of the few changes that they did suggest. Some people will want flexible hours and they would be quite happy to work a Saturday one day, a Friday the next, 1 week, a Friday the next. But I think in terms of agreeing what the income is, that will depend on their arrangement with the employer, and I don't think we can enforce particularly anything on that regard. Changes in working patterns, I'm again assuming there, Deputy Taddy, is referring to a situation where someone cancels a shift, for example, at short notice. The employment the Employment Forum, my recollection was that they did not recommend any specific penalty or compensation to be paid for very short notice of cancellation, although we did agree that we would do some further work in terms of really promoting best practice and making sure that 0 hours contract workers are treated fairly at all times, because they do suit many employees. Deputy Taddy's question on tribunal, I'm afraid I'm slightly at a loss as to follow the question, and I simply don't have that answer. I met the chair of the tribunal some months ago. This wasn't an issue that was raised with me. I think anybody on a 0 hours contract, they still have the same employment rights as someone else, including as to unfair dismissal and redundancy and all the other Day 1 employment rights particularly, and they have the same rights to go to tribunal, but I'm afraid I simply don't have any knowledge of the situations that I think Deputy Taddy is discussing. And to return, last but not by no means least, to Deputy Southern, I think with this, where if an employee on a 0 hours contract is working a settled pattern, what will happen is that they will go to the employer, ask for a revised statement of terms showing that they will work, in my previous example, Monday to Friday between 9 and 1. If the employer refuses, they're entitled to request a review of that. The employer may only refuse in very defined circumstances, and if they refuse incorrectly, then the employee can go to tribunal. The normal employment rights as to statement of terms still exist. So, for example, Article 9 of the law will make it an offence for an employer to fail to give the employee a written statement of the amended particulars within 4 weeks. And as is the case with other employment contracts, the penalty for that offence is up to level 3 on the standard scale, which is £10,000. I think this will be, I would hope that employers will treat this in the spirit the Assembly are hopefully going to agree to it. The employee, of course, retains all their other rights as an employee under the employment law. So I hope that has answered the Deputy's question, sir. Thank you.
You maintain the principles?
I maintain the principles, yes, sir.
Those in favour of adopting the principles kindly show. Those against? The principles are adopted. Does the scrutiny panel wish to call this in?
No, sir, but I will say a few words on the articles in a moment.
Yes. How do you wish to deal with them in second reading then, Minister?
On block, please, sir.
Are they seconded in second reading?
Sir.
Does anyone wish to speak in second reading?
Sorry, sir. I was concentrating so much on getting the right article, and this is where I think paper could be king, because I've got to scroll through this. So I just make a point that the scrutiny panel doesn't want to call this in because we don't want to delay this in any way, but it's certainly something we will come back to look at the workings of this, the success of the working of this, and the implications of this for employees and, of course, employers. There are many who have contracts, and there's just a couple of things I'll mention, and this may be me being a little pedantic, sir, but I think sometimes pedantry is useful in these circumstances. In the Article 5b, it refers to a serious detriment on this can be refused by the employer if there is a serious detrimental effect on business, and the word serious is there. And just to say that in the explanatory notes, that word serious is not there. Now, it may well be me being a little finicky, if that's a word, sir, but I think it's important that the way these things are applied, because if it's just a detrimental effect, that could simply be as inconvenient for an employer. However, a serious detrimental effect needs to be defined, and that's certainly something I think, sir, that the panel would track as to how that is being used and applied in these circumstances. So there are some details here that I think we need to be very careful of when we look at this employment law and this change. So that was the main one. And I would also say, sir, that in terms of applying for this, it's up to the employee to apply for this in writing. Some sort of assistance for some employees to do that may be necessary. I know employees do struggle with these things, standing up for their own rights, particularly young people, particularly those who are so reliant upon on the job they are in Jersey, because the cost of living is so high, and there are so many things they need to be paying for up front. And so many people who work on these contracts are living week to week, month to month, and don't have this this backup in any way. So we need to be very careful to enable employees to do this, and there needs to be something in place to enable that. So this is an effective change and one that improves employment circumstances for people in Jersey. Other than that, sir, I welcome this change. Thank you, sir.
David Sutherland.
Yes, sir. And I'm perhaps being equally as little as pedantic as the previous speaker when I notice that the minister talked about that the refusal by the employer, the terms in which they can refuse are very tightly drawn. I would ask her to go back to the report and note that in fact the terms under which this can be refused is actually very widely drawn, I believe. And I'd like to hear from the minister a justification of why she calls them tightly drawn, when I believe my reading of them was very much, they were very loosely drawn and open to exploitation.
Does any other member wish to speak in second reading? No other member wishes to speak. And I close the debate and call upon the Minister to respond.
Thank you, sir. Just to answer those points, I'm not sure if Deputy Ward was saying that scrutiny hadn't seen these. No, sorry. Okay, sorry, that's my misunderstanding. I think both Deputy Ward and Deputy Sutherland have said the same thing, broadly queried the same thing. The employer can only refuse request if the amendments do not reflect the employee's work pattern. So if an employee says, I would like a contract that says I'm working Monday to Friday 9 to 1, and the employer says, but actually you don't, you only work Monday to Wednesday 9 to 12, that's one option. The second one, it does say seriously detrimental. The amendment to the statement would have a seriously detrimental effect on the performance of the employer's business. Now, it would be for the employer to show that there is a seriously detrimental effect, and I don't know what that would be, because if you have somebody who is working fixed hours, simply giving them a contract saying that would not have a seriously detrimental effect on the performance. But that is for the employer to show. And then the next category is the employer has reasonable grounds to consider that the employee's work patterns will change within 4 weeks. Or the employee's contract of employment is due to end within 4 weeks. So someone perhaps is already working their notice. So that those have been set out. The employer would have to be able to justify any refusal. The employee, as I've said, can request a review. If they say no, you have been unreasonable, will you review it? And if they still refuse, the employee does have the ability to go to the tribunal. And to pick up, sorry, I don't have very effective notes here. Deputy Ward's point, I accept that some people will struggle to deal with their employer, and I believe that JACS, Jersey Advisory and Conciliation Service, is always there to provide assistance to employees who need help with employment matters and to give advice and guidance. So I think that's as much as I can offer at the moment, and I've lost my place.
You maintain the articles in second reading?
Sorry?
You maintain the articles in
I
second
maintain the articles in second reading. Thank you, sir.
Those in favour of adopting the articles in second reading kindly show. Those against? The articles are adopted in second reading. Do you propose in third readings?
Yes, please, sir.
Are they seconded for third reading?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak in third reading? Deputy Ferry.
Yes, sir. Just before we move to the final vote on this, I just want to take a moment to thank the members of the Employment Forum. They're all volunteers, and their bread and butter work is looking after minimum wage increases, and that's a yearly piece of work which takes up a lot of their time, and it's nice for them to be able to move out of that zone and into other areas of the employment law where they can make small refinements like this, which actually in some cases can have a large positive impact on people's lives. So I know that some people from the forum may even be watching this afternoon, and I think it's fitting that we acknowledge the fruits of their labour by what's come through this afternoon, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy, does any other member wish to speak in third reading? No other member wish to speak. I close the debate. Did you wish to comment, Minister, on that?
No, sir, I completely endorse and agree with Deputy Ferry's comments, and I maintain. Can I call for the appel? You maintain the law in third reading and call for the appel. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats and ask the referee to open the voting. The vote is adoption in third reading of the draft law, P100. Members have had the opportunity of casting their votes. Then I ask the referee to close the voting. Sorry, referee. Two more. That the law is adopted in third reading, 41 votes pour, no votes contre, no abstentions. The next item of public business is amendment to standing orders, role of elected members P101, lodged by the Privileges and Procedures Committee, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to make the following amendment to the standing orders of the States of Jersey with effect from the date of the 2026 general election.
Ted.
Thank you, sir. At least I think it's thank you, sir. PPC has lodged this proposition which proposes to amend standing orders to change the order in which elected members shall be called. This follows a briefing which was provided to all States members in September, asking for views on the proposed amendment. The proposed amendment, if approved, would provide for connotabs to be called first in the order determined according to the length of time each of them had held office as an elected member. Deputies will be called second in the order determined according to the length of time each of them has held office as an elected member. The committee has included specific provisions regarding the order in which members shall be called. If two or more elected members have held such office for the same length of time, the order between them will be determined according to alphabetical order of their surnames. If there is more than one elected member with the same surname, the order between them will be determined according to the alphabetical order of their forenames. There have been a number of views from the public about the importance of these proposed changes, and I wanted to address that today. The main purpose of lodging this amendment is to address the issues that were raised following the 2022 elections. There were two in particular. The first was that different rules apply for connotabs and deputies. For example, a previous service as a deputy does not count in determining the role of connotabs, but does for deputies. The other issue raised was that those who have been senator in the Assembly from 2018 to 2022 appeared after returning deputies for the role, although the opposite might have been expected. Any changes to the roll call to address issues such as these require amendments to standing orders, and those amendments can only be made with the agreement of this Assembly through the adoption of a proposition such as this. There is no other way to amend standing orders, however a small change may be required. I hope these changes will make it simpler for the next Assembly. If approved, the changes would not take effect until after the 2026 election, and sir, I move the proposition.
Proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Ward.
Sir, this makes me so angry. I've been out at lunchtime today, and so many people have said to me that the debate yesterday saw Jersey in a really bad light. Here we are, navel-gazing, day two. Surely this is insanity, and we're just seeing ourselves navel-gazing. The outside world is looking at what we're doing. I cannot believe we even spent 2 minutes debating this.
Deputy Alves?
Thank you, sir. I just want to make it quite clear that the standing orders are decided by us through a democratic process. We do not want that to be taken away from the Assembly and given responsibility to somebody else to impose the rules of this Assembly onto us. That is the reason why this amendment has to be brought to the Assembly. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Scott?
Thank you, sir. Well, I would just wonder whether the Chair in her closing speech might address some questions I have about this majority view, because I know that the PPC contacted members asking for their views, and I was one who basically said I didn't really care. I don't really care, you know, let's just get on with things. So I wonder to what extent people who expressed that they didn't really care, was that actually marked as a contra or an abstention in calculating this majority. Also, it was interesting that the chair said that an opposite view could have been taken. So basically, we learned that for some reason, and I don't know, because, you know, I mean, the States Assembly has a history and I'm not party to every bit of it, but it seems like the constables are dressed in a certain order, and somebody suggested that there should be some consistency between them and deputies. Now, but it doesn't seem like, and it's gone in a way of actually making deputies consistent with constables, so that it's deputies who are kind of put in the order of service. So why did it go that way? Was it because a number of deputies had actually requested this? I'm just interested because I'm just interested how this even got here, basically. But I have to say, on reflection, as I thought more about this, we thought about democracy, I did think, I don't even know why we shouldn't just all be in alphabetical order, but it is as it is, and I really didn't care. And I do feel a little, and with every respect that I have for anybody who's managed to serve as long in the States Assembly, knowing what a tough job it is, that I did find myself feeling a little uncomfortable, thinking, I don't know, it's a bit like, you know, the women to be democracy, everybody's meant to be equal. Isn't this the same as stopping a hat to something that's been around for a while? So we'd ask those questions just so I'm better informed. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Talley?
Thank you, sir. I can understand Deputy Ward's anger, although I can't help thinking it's perhaps anger for a different reason, which is manifesting itself into this proposition. And I also think that it's slightly cheap, and it's certainly not PPC's fault, as Deputy Alves has explained. They're duty bound to bring these. And what's the alternative? Do we do these things behind closed doors? Because the Assembly is here to debate large items, small items to do with running order, etc., and everything else in between. And if we started making changes behind the scenes, the same public who wish to find fault would say, oh, now they're being very secretive, and what's going on here? They're changing their rules behind to suit themselves. We shouldn't shy away from speaking in debate simply because we think that there is some external pressure from some dominant voices who don't necessarily understand our internal mechanisms. Doesn't mean we have to spend disproportionate time talking about them either, but we have to recognise that that's something that we do. And there is a paradox, of course, that the media on the one hand will spend so much time talking about this and fanning up the flames so that there's so much controversy that there are even columns designated to it in the Jersey Evening Post's opinion pieces by the free workers that they use, the non-paid, unpaid journalists who don't even get, I suspect, minimum wage for their labours. talking about how they don't agree with it. So they've got their opinions and they're the ones deciding that it's an issue, not, I think, PPC or us. Now, if you'd asked me 5 or 10 years ago what I thought of this, I might have objected very strongly in strong terms, and the Constable of St Lawrence may well know what I'm talking about, because as soon as I see the word constable in a proposition, my eyes and ears used to prick up. And the old Deputy Tadyer, or rather should I have said the young Deputy Tadyer, might have said something like, you might have quoted a line from Orwell's Animal Farm and said, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. But that was the old Deputy Tadyer, not the middle-aged Deputy Tadyer that we have today. And I'll give you 3 reasons why I'm quite comfortable with the constables being called first. Maybe let's make it 4 even. The first point is that they are already called first now, so it's not really a change. But the 3 reasons that I'm comfortable is, first of all, the constables are the oldest class of member that we have. So if we think that tradition is important, and some people do think traditions are important, then the constables were here a long time before the new kids on the block who are the deputies, and they were certainly here a long time before the senators were here, and the senators are no longer here. And of course the jurats are no longer here and the rectors are no longer here, but we do have one dean for whom I think we're very grateful in some ways. When he does speak, he speaks wisely. The second reason is a practical one and a slightly selfish one. It means that if I know the constables are being called first, it gives me slightly longer to get into the assembly. And so if I'm in the corridor and I listen out very carefully and I know that the constables are still being called, then I've got at least a few more seconds to get to my seat, and I know I'll be probably third to be called after they've finished being called. And the third reason, 3rd stroke 4, is that they may not be in the assembly much longer, so let's let them let them have their day. I do have a slightly more serious point to ask. It's just a check, because I think the wording could have been tighter. And I did point this out in an earlier debate, because I think it's a fundamental point of fairness. It's wrong, for example, that Deputy Gorst, who's a longer serving member than I am, gets called after me. There's no fairness in that, so he should naturally be called before me on this internal logic that we have, if we're going to have any internal logic. So it's important that Deputy Gorst is recognised as being here longer than I am. I do question, though, whether, and I would like someone on PPC to answer this, is there any recognition of continual service, and is continual service differentiated from length of service at all? I'm presuming from the reading that no difference is made. And I raise this, I suppose, for a couple of points. We do have members in this assembly who were members for a period, they took a break, and then they came back into the assembly. I don't have a strong feeling on it one way or the other, but will they be treated the same as another member who might have served exactly the same amount of time? This issue may actually not arise, because one consideration is that if you were elected between 2008 and 2011, you would have only done a 3-year period, because the terms of office back then were 3 years. And now they gradually moved to a 4-year term. But it does raise the question, should it be done on the years of service or the actual terms of service? Because it's not somebody's fault who served between, say, 2005 and 2008, that the term of office was just 3 years. And if they've done another more recent term, they would have only done 7 years. They've done 2 terms of office, compared to somebody else who's done 2 terms of office, which is 8 years. So I just put that into the mix for thought, sir. But this isn't especially controversial. But what else would we be doing today if we're not debating this?
Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Hegarty.
Thank you, sir. Most of us weren't actually going to speak about that, but unfortunately somebody decided to raise a concern about it. After the last election, we lost the role of a senator, and therefore there was concerns raised that those people who had been senators were then further down the roll call than those that were newer members. This is a housekeeping matter which was brought by our PPC, because that's the role we have. There was a presentation from the greffier about all of the options and what people's opinions and views were, and they were logged, and therefore that's why the decisions were made as they were. We were actually hoping that nobody would stand up and speak, because we'd have been all done and dusted. But I had to say that this is a housekeeping matter. We were briefed by the Gref, and those people who'd actually gone to that presentation would have understood fully what was going on. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I put my light on to speak before, but all of the points that I wanted to make has been made eloquently by Deputy Tadier, and always he has answered exactly the questions about continual service, because there are a couple of members, I'm one of them, that have taken a break, and I just wanted to understand from PPC's perspective, Deputy former Senator Balash is another Deputy of Greville originally. That long service to this Assembly is not reflected in the roll call, and I don't think that's exactly right. So equality for members in terms of their cumulative length of service is what I would suggest is done, because I'm looking back and seeing one member who's been in this Assembly longer than anybody.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Renouf.
Yes, very briefly. I'm afraid I will be voting contra. The problems that this addresses are trivial. Why should length of service be reflected in the roll call? I don't get it. Why should there be? I do find it interesting as Deputy Tadier settles into middle-age establishment thinking that he is so focused on hierarchical distinctions and the need to distinguish between lengths of service, whether it's a continuous service or not continuous service. I guess it's an interesting sport, but I would be very happy to see this done randomly or by alphabetical order. I think it's really, I think there's a subtle message being conveyed when we say that constables come first and then length of service comes before shorter service, and I think those distinctions shouldn't really exist. They shouldn't be reflected in the roll call. The roll call should be an entirely neutral thing, so I shall vote contra.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and call upon the Chair of PPC to respond.
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to say that this is my absolutely least favourite proposition I've ever brought to this Assembly. And as my personal view is I don't really care where I am in the roll call. And addressing Deputy Renouf, he says, well, why don't we have it alphabetical order? Why don't we have it reverse alphabetical order? You know, he might be further up the... This is something... and the passionate outburst from Deputy Waugh maybe shows that he does not understand what PPC does. As he has seen today, we brought this along with two more important propositions in today, and it is a democracy, and we have to bring standing orders to the Assembly. We cannot make decisions like this, however trivial, behind closed doors. And if someone asks us to look at it, like some members did, then that is the role of my committee. So, you know, in housing, you may have things that you don't particularly want to do. But we are a democracy, and we cannot hide. I'm very, very grateful to Deputy Alves and Deputy Tadier. Deputy Scott, my notes are so bad, I can't see what I've written. But yeah, I actually think that I'd like to cut this quite short and say that yeah, this has not come from me or particularly members of PPC. This is something that was brought to PPC that, as a democracy, we have to do. It is standing orders, and I would just like to ask for the appel. Thank you.
So we did ask a question, I think, Deputy Joseph and I, about whether it's continual service.
Are you able to answer that, Conatar?
I should be able to. No, there is not. With the new standing order, there's no advantage given to continual service, so length of service will be determined by the total length, regardless of whether it is continuous or done in bits. Thank you, sir. Sorry I missed that all.
And in terms of interpreting the proposition, that would be my interpretation of the proposition.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Very well. Is the appel called for, or? The appel was called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on the adoption of P101, the amendment to the roll of elected members, and I ask the greffier to open the voting. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. I'll ask the referee to close the voting. Oh, sorry. The proposition has been adopted. 30 votes pour, 11 votes contre, 1 abstention.
The names, please.
Those voting for the Connotables of St Lawrence, St Brelard, Trinity, St Peter's, St Martin, St John, St Juan, St Mary, and Brewville and St Saviour online, and deputies Southern, Labby, Tadier, Doublé, Lehigara, Rob Ward, Alves, Gardner, Mesick, Osif, Balash, Coles, Porray, Curtis, Feltham, Miller, Howell, Ferry, Ward and Stevenson. Those voting contre, the deputies Luce, Morel, Ayer, Moore, War, Miles, Scott, Renouf, Curtis, Wilson and Andrews, and Deputy Kovac abstained.
Very well. The next item is the maximum employment probation periods P103 lodged by Deputy Andrews. The main responder will be the Minister for Social Security. Deputy, you've lodged an amendment to your proposition. Do you wish to take it as amended?
Yes, I do. Sir, I was wondering if it's okay to take part A, B and D, so C will be excluded.
You don't want to move part C. No. May I just look at this, please? So you don't want to move part C?
That's it, sir, yeah.
Yes. And yes, there's no reason why that can't, but you wish it otherwise taken as amended?
Yes, please, sir.
Very well. Ask the referee to read the proposition as amended. I beg your pardon, are members content to take it as amended? Nemcon, yes. Oh.
Sorry, may I ask a question? I have submitted a comments paper rejecting this amendment. I'm happy to continue the debate if members are happy to continue the debate. I don't think it's a huge issue of employment policy, but I would just like to check that members are content with that position.
You mean content in the light of the fact that...
yes, that we're...
that we're in
I think I'm
period
technically
of
still
uncertainty.
opposed. Yes.
Well, nobody has raised any objection, and it seems to me that it's the only way that the proposition can continue if someone's in a position to respond to it. So, very well. Would you read the proposition as amended, please?
The states are asked to decide whether they're of opinion to agree that employment probation periods should be amended within the Employment Jersey Law 2003 to A, set a maximum employment probation period of no more than 6 months, B, ensure that any extension in an employment probation period can only be made once and does not result in the total probation period exceeding the maximum employment probation period set out in A. D, ensure that any employee on a fixed-term contract of 6 months or less will not be subject to a work probation period, and to request the Minister for Social Security to bring forward the necessary legislative changes to implement these amendments no later than June 2025.
Deputy.
Thank you very much, sir. This proposition has come about due to me being aware of one particular case where an employee was on their work probation, and unfortunately they had a very bad experience on the work probation. It happened to be extended on multiple occasions, and the reasons given were inadequate. And I thought, upon hearing this person speak, that something ought to be done. And so I did a bit of investigating, and I spoke to a couple of other people who also experienced hardship on the work probation period as well, such as cases where individuals were being used for an employer who was essentially using them as a matter of convenience, maybe due to their business situation, where maybe, say, somebody was on maternity leave and they were maybe coming back in a few months' time, and maybe the working relationship was not going well between the employee and the employer. So the employer gave reason to extend the work probation period for the employee. However, there was never going to be any permanency in the person being retained. Now, I think it's very important, sir, to mention that a work probation period is a relationship that can be developed where the employer and the employee can raise concerns with one another that arise. I know certainly from my experience when I worked in, say, financial services, sir, we would usually have a weekly catch-up between, say, week 1 to week 12, and any issues that arose with the employer, they would then discuss that with me. We would speak through maybe what went wrong and what could we then do to improve things. So it's about learning about how to improve outcomes on the work probation period. Now, of course, there has been mention in my proposition in terms of other jurisdictions who've got conditions set out for the length of term for a work probation period, sir. And that seems to be in, say, more social democratic countries. And there's a reason for this, because what you don't want to see is people who are in a very vulnerable position. They have sought new employment, and nobody wants to be in a position where they are willing to be open about the concerns that were raised with their employer, about their performance, for instance, and nobody's willing to really go to a tribunal because, again, then it could be mentioned, say, publicly, and the case could be brought to the attention to the wider public. And, of course, many individuals who are on the work probation period are in a period of financial instability, shall we say, sir, because if you've proven yourself and you've got a permanent contract, then it's really showing that the employer has faith in you. So upon passing your work probation period, that there should be longevity in that working contract for the employee. But again, that really depends on the type of contract that we are speaking about here, sir. But a good employer should not be concerned about this proposition, sir, because really a good employer should ensure that the employee reaches the standards to pass a criteria in order to then pass a work probation period and then to be retained as a permanent staff member. What we should not be seeing, however, sir, is the exploitation of labour, sir. And that has been a common feature from when I lodged my proposition. I had several people come to me and they were saying, well, there ought to be something that is done about this. And, you know, in one particular case, somebody was in a very vulnerable position where they had their work probation period extended on multiple occasions before they were then essentially made redundant. And they had to really give consideration for, do they then dispose of their home? That was how serious this case became for that person. Now, I don't think it should ever get to that point where the employer is extending a work probation more than once, because I think really the working relationship between the employer and the employee at that point is fundamentally, sir, it's broken. The employee is fully aware that the employer has concerns with the employee's performance, and therefore the working relationship is probably damaged beyond repair. Now, I know when I spoke to one individual who happened to be an employer, and they spoke to me about one case where they employed somebody, and part of the work probation was about reaching sales targets in the industry that they worked for. And they said, well, because a person didn't reach the sales targets, I got rid of them. And by doing that and basing this decision on sales, what you could be seeing is somebody who is very capable in the role, somebody who is perhaps a suitable fit in the team, being let go due to conditions that I believe could be fairly arbitrary, and there's no safeguards for the person person's well-being, and also an understanding of their position and their family's position, because it may be the case you've got a couple and they're working hard, and one of them has to come home and say to their partner, well, I'm sorry, but this is the circumstances. Started my new job, and my employer has told me that I have not passed the work probation period because I've not met a series of sales that were set out in the criteria. Now, we could also argue that the employee was willing to abide to the terms in the employment contract and proceed with the work probation period under those terms. But as politicians, I think we have a duty of care when we do hear about stories about hardship that people do face on the work probation period. We really, as a decision-making body, ought to be bringing forward proposals that are relative to our electorate, and also will address some of the inefficiencies that may be very rare, however they do exist. And I do understand that the Social Security Minister does acknowledge this to be a potential issue that is maybe not so prevalent as maybe other issues. However, it is one that has been evident to me, and for that reason, sir, I believe something has to be done about it. Now, looking at the employment Jersey law, I definitely believe there ought to be enhancements in the future in a number of areas, when we look at, say, unfair dismissal and other areas. But I think this proposition will allow for enhancements to the law to protect labour at last in this respect, because during your work probation period it can be very tumultuous. A lot of people feel they cannot really speak up for themselves, and if they do have, say, a bad employer, there's no real rights for the employee to voice their concerns. And I think that's probably one of the weaknesses that we see in Jersey's employment law that I think we probably should pay special attention to in the future. Now, the second part really looking at, say, the extension of probation periods. I think if somebody is on the work probation period and the extension of the probation period happens more than once, then quite clearly things are not working. And I think there always must be some form of flexibility within the work probation period, but certainly from an employer's perspective, you would like to see somebody fulfill the work probation period without any breakups in terms of having weeks or months on end where the person takes leave, because I think that may be an indication that the person, in some cases, may not be a suitable or reliable employee for the employer. So, now, looking at the 6-month fixed term condition that is set out in the proposition, sir, this follows suit with the Netherlands and their regulations that they brought forward. Now, the Netherlands, they've set out a number of conditions for maximum work probation periods, but also the fixed-term contracts. So what I'm saying, sir, is any fixed-term contract less than a period of 6 months, it's not necessary for it to be subject to the subject for a period of work probation. And the reason for this is, in many cases, when you're looking at employers and they maybe just need to see an individual maybe come on board, say, for a fixed term of 3 or 4 months, really it's a natural process where they are only filling the position. It might be, say, they're covering, say, sickness or maternity leave, etc. But there may also be cases where people are only coming on board for a certain amount of time. There may be an extension to the fixed-term contract that may be extended once again. However, sir, I think it's trying to reduce layers of bureaucracy and trying to make the employment law a bit more flexible, like the Netherlands, sir. And I think that is probably something that I personally would prefer to see. However, members may differ to me, sir. So that is all I have to say, and I move a proposition, sir. Thank you.
Proposition seconded. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Minister.
Thank you, sir. Sir, if the Deputy Andrew doesn't mind, can I just pop back very briefly to my previous to the amendment law and our discussion about employees being able to request fixed,
Excuse me.
being able to ask for a change to their contract of employment to reflect their actual hours. Sorry. I have in the interim had a message from the director at Jersey Advisory and Conciliation Service who has confirmed that they will have a pro forma form that they will be able to help employees who wish to make that request to their employer. So JACS will absolutely promote it, and they will help us. They will help employees who wish to request a change from a 0 to fixed term. Very apologise to Deputy Andrews for a little diversion. So to return to Deputy Andrews' proposition. So in his report attached to this proposition, the Deputy refers to potential unfairness which could occur in a situation where an employee's probationary period is extended beyond a period of 6 months. The Deputy calls for a maximum period of 6 months, subject to that period not being extended more than once. On one reading of the Deputy's proposition, it seems to be a solution in search of a problem. It is not at all clear that there is a problem in Jersey which needs to be solved, and I made that clear in a reply to the Deputy's oral question, which I answered on 11 December 2023. So it's important to bear in mind, in the context of this debate, that our employment law already provides a range of protections for employees, regardless of whether they are trainees, apprentices, full or part-time, or probationers. I think it's important to emphasise here that an employee who is subject to a probationary period is still an employee with all of the employment rights that entails. Employers are required to provide their employees with a detailed summary of their terms and conditions, which can include details of probationary periods. Everyone is treated equally under the law and has precisely the same rights. In particular, the provisions relating to unfair dismissal apply to all employees, but only once they've reached 52 weeks service, as do claims for automatic unfair dismissal, which is a day one employment right, and even someone on probation will be able to claim automatic unfair dismissal. The Deputy offers very little evidence that any of these employment rights are undermined by the lack of a maximum probationary period. As I said in my answer to the Deputy's oral question, the evidence points to probationary periods of between 3 and 6 months being the norm in Jersey. On that basis alone, that renders this proposition unnecessary. The Deputy has referred to, I think, 1 or 2 cases where people have told him that they have had a bad experience or they felt aggrieved by virtue of the way their probationary period has been handled. I do accept that if somebody's probation, if someone's employment is not continued at the end of a probation period, they may well feel aggrieved and they may feel let down by that employee. But this will not resolve the matter. It simply means that a person could be kept on for 6 months rather than 3 months and let go at the end of that period. It will not give the employee any greater certainty. And as for the Deputy's suggestion that people are using probationary periods rather than fixed-term contracts to cover short-term hires, that is not something that has ever been pointed out to me. If someone wants a short-term hire to cover maternity, then I'd expect them to get someone on a short fixed-term contract. So again, I'm not sure that makes this proposition necessary. So the crucial question is what extra protection for employees this amendment would put in place. An employee working a period of less than 52 weeks can still be dismissed after 6 months without the right to claim unfair dismissal. Where then is the benefit of a maximum probationary period? The risk to the employee is that the employer inserts a probationary clause of 6 months, no more and no less, and without this amendment, they may have applied a 3-month period. And sir, I strongly suspect that's what would happen, that we will have employment contracts all over Jersey being changed to go to a 6-month period rather than a 3-month period, because in my experience in any sector, as soon as you put in a maximum, that becomes the floor and not the ceiling. So employers will go for a 6-month period to give themselves the maximum flexibility. Complying with the amendment at Part B of the proposition would in most cases avoid the need for an extension, but would place the employee in a far more invidious position, since the employment contract would not, on the face of it, give the opportunity for the employee's position to be confirmed at an earlier stage than 6 months. There may also be cases, and I think this is a very real risk, in regulated financial services positions where an employer may choose to end the employment if the employee has not clearly and fully met any relevant competency requirements, rather than extending the period a little to allow the relevant training to be completed. I am not aware of employers using probationary periods to exploit employees in the way the Deputy suggests. So ultimately, this is a matter of good contractual practice which does not need the intervention of the employment law. The Deputy has mentioned foreign legislation, and I think he mentions both Ireland and the Netherlands. I think we have to be very careful in cherry-picking elements of law from other jurisdictions. The Irish legislation, for example, while it says in the private sector a probationary period cannot be more than 6 months, it does allow, in certain circumstances, for that 6-month period to be extended. And of more concern to me, in the public sector, it allows a probationary period of 12 months. That would almost certainly mean government, if we were to adopt that route, government, and I'm sure governments in Europe will routinely now have 12-month probationary periods. That cannot be in the interests of an employee to have that level of potential uncertainty hanging over them. Turning to the other main element of the Deputy's proposition, that those employees on a fixed-term contract of 6 months or less should not be subject to a probationary period. The principle applying to the relationship between an employer and employee is the same, regardless of the length or type of contract. Is the employee right for the business, and is the business right for the employee? Yes, sorry. There is a need for adequate training for an employee over a period of time, no matter how short the contract. If an employer cannot be confident that an employee can operate in a particular working environment without demonstrating the necessary skills, then a ban on a probationary period will potentially be to the disadvantage of the employee. This may be in industries where potentially dangerous machinery and processes are involved, and it is entirely in the employer's interest to make sure that an employee can work safely and has the skills to do so. So it's important that employees working during a probationary period are treated fairly. Flexibility is a key requirement of the employment relationship. There is no evidence that the lack of a maximum probationary period has led to significant unfairness in Jersey. Contractual probationary periods are of reasonable duration, generally between 3 and 6 months. They are a recognised and accepted part of the employment landscape. The law in Jersey is designed to reflect local conditions of employment and not to intrude into contractual arrangements between employee and employer, unless necessary, and where there is clear evidence of harm or disadvantage. The Deputy's proposition, in my view, has the capacity and potential to increase harm and disadvantage for an employee, and I ask the Assembly to reject it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I accept that Deputy Andrews has been conscientious in bringing this proposition in response to a concern raised by one of his constituents. And it's very important, I believe, to just think about the resources that are used to amend laws and the priorities of law draftsmen and look at the potential risks that are involved in pursuing a proposed solution. And having myself canvass views amongst employers, a lot of what I have found simply is in line with what the Minister for Social Security has said. And in addition, I think I might point the Deputy to some of the comments on the States Assembly Twitter account where he was explaining his amendment, and some of them did make these same points. I wonder how many employers the Deputy consulted reformulating his proposal. Recruiting and developing good people is hard and very time-consuming. Employers have a strong incentive to make each new hire work. And what real-world problem is this proposition seeking to solve. And the point about it's unworkable for regulated bodies such as police, which has a separate law, and clinicians such as paramedics who need to demonstrate competence and train on the job. And also there is a contractual requirement for certain qualifications such as apprentices. And one person did ask a question of the deputy, which didn't reply, about how many employees are under a contract with probation period less than 6 months. Well, I don't think any of us could answer that quite yet now. But essentially, the purpose of probation is just to give the employee an opportunity to show how they will perform. At the end, there is usually a review or conversation that goes on between the employer and the employee about that performance. And what can happen, I mean, either the employer is going to say, I'm really sorry, you're just not up to scratch and it's not working and that sort of thing, let it go. Or the employer might well say, well, look, you know, there's this, that and the other, and I feel we need to resolve these things in order for me to employ. Let's extend that probation period. And the difficulty with this proposition is it's saying the maximum probation period will be 6 months, end of. And it can take 6 months in order to fairly have somebody demonstrate employment. And so there is that danger that basically if the employer is just told, right, that's it, 6 months and you can't do any more, that basically people will be let go. Having worked in something, having had the opportunity to feedback on how they might just adjust, improve their performance, and basically the employer says, well, look, I'd like to give you a chance to just improve here, but I'm taking a risk and I can't afford to do so. I'm sorry, goodbye, and good luck. I understand that the deputy mentioned sales and that context as well, and I do know and have friends amongst certain businesses that do use salesmen, and I don't actually think it's an easy job at all. It's incredibly difficult to be successful in sales, and it's pretty hard-nosed in the sense that a lot of the time people think you can do it, you can't. And if the conditions aren't right, if the product isn't right, the people who actually, if you like, are more suited towards sales, almost like, well, you know, they know that they're just selling that's something that people won't buy. And if in fact there isn't really genuinely a market for that product, then I don't think that the actual contract's going to really last anyway. But yeah, I understand that the deputy is concerned about abuse of the vulnerable, and there has been a mention about who might this be? Where are the instances we've got where people, somebody vulnerable might be in a situation where they're being put on probation and it just keeps getting extended. And I was contacted by one person, an individual, maybe other states members were as well, who told a story about their situation. And I, unfortunately, because that contact came at time, because I thought it was an interesting story, and then I just thought, there's some things that I don't quite understand here. I don't understand if this is a person who's vulnerable. Why didn't this person walk away? Because we've got an employment market where people are crying for staff, so why didn't they walk away? And then I thought, well, maybe they're vulnerable, maybe they didn't understand that. But then there was a mention of having used lawyers and that sort of thing, and I just thought, I need to ask more questions. In an ideal world, I would have asked for this proposition to have been delayed so that I could investigate it, but and I have to apologise to the person who wrote to me, because I just didn't, I haven't, given the circumstances and the situation, I wasn't actually able to really get back to that person. But ultimately, I'm just not convinced that the problem that's being addressed in this way, that it actually raises more risks and the potential of using resources for what might be a very unique situation. So I think it's great that this was brought to our attention, but I am in line with the Minister for Social Security on this occasion. Thank you.
Deputy Joseph.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the backdrop of this proposition is, as Deputy Scott has just said, the recruitment market. One of the issues that the Council of Ministers has had from the start, this Assembly has had, is the fact that we have an island which is in a recruitment crisis. We have a shortness of, we have a tightness in the labour market, which has been set out very clearly on a number of reports. Last week, members will have received the actively seeking work numbers, and there are currently 720 people. 81% of them are British Jersey people, as described by the report. I also asked the Statistics Unit if they could provide some information. I was grateful for them to do so. That there are also there is also 10,000 weeks of lost work because of short-term incapacity people, in other words, people ill. And there are also over 4,500 of people with long-term incapacity benefits. Now, challenges that many of governments are facing is how to get, how to see whether or not people who are sick, and short-term, of course, they're sick, but how can actually you encourage work for people that I've previously, working from home, etc., there are lots more work opportunities that are available. And flexible working markets, good standards of employment practice are going to encourage people to work and off benefits. And that's what the Social Security Minister and the Assistant Social Security Minister is trying to achieve. The elephant in the room, unfortunately, and I was grateful for Deputy Andrews' proposition, which I think deserves some more thought and some more scrutiny, and it's very difficult. This is a backbencher proposition. I enjoyed reading Deputy Andrews' report. I read the German constitutional, it's actually in their Bill of Rights, the probationary periods, the 6 months issue. I thought that was really interesting. The Netherlands issue that's there, that was the clicks that you can go through in Deputy Andrews' report, are very interesting. We have a recruitment crisis, sir. It's one of the biggest problems we've got to deal with. Our Home Affairs Minister is charged with work permit rules. And of course, probationary periods on 9-month short-term contracts, well, that's as good as nothing, really, because our work permit arrangements are for 9-month short-term contracts. They're extended. It's not addressed here in the report, but worker rights in terms of work permits is something that I know the Minister is concerned about and other members are concerned about. And we've got a massive problem with inflation. Cost of living is rising because of the tightness of the labour market. It's something that the next government's going to have to tackle because it's serious. The issue of encouraging people back to work is a challenge that whoever is Social Security Minister is going to have to really take seriously, together with the unfairnesses that exist with the rights that work permit holders have. Work permit holders are not, in my experience, a number of them have come to me where they're paid different rates of pay. Their probationary period of 6 months when they're on a 9-month contract, that is superseded by the ability for the employer who has to provide the accommodation, deducts costs, all sorts of things that are really beneath the skin of what is a fair labour market. Externally, we need to promote Jersey as a place that is a really good place to work. A really good place to work with good rights, good responsibilities and good pay rates. And that's how we're going to attract people into our health service, into our frontline services and in all the rest of it. Good standards, good rates of pay with fair arrangements for when people are disgruntled. JACS, which has been, it is JACS. JACS provides really excellent support for people. The Deputy has raised, as I have heard from 2 constituents, issues about not just probationary periods, but the way that people are treated in that first period of employment. The deputy clearly has one example, but there are more of them, where workers are being taken, employers are taking on workers, and it's unclear whether or not the probationary period means that effectively the minister said that it's between 3 and 6 months, it won't make any difference, but there is clearly a standard. There's an EU standard of a probationary period which is set out. I think that's encompassed in the Irish, the Netherlands, and the German standards, the minimum work time directive, and all the rest of it. We need to make Jersey attractive for employees to come here. With rights come responsibilities, and we're talking about workers' rights here. And it does need to be looked at. I don't know whether the deputy is right to request this specific piece of legislation, but he deserves to be heard, and this issue deserves to be scrutinised, as Deputy Scott has said. There may be some finessing of our work arrangements. There's certainly got to be some work done on our work permit rules and the way that some people are treated versus others. A day's pay should be equal for all people, and the rights for dismissal, the deductions on people's wages, which all form part of the disgruntlement between an employer and an employer. Currently, work permit employees can't argue. All the decisions in the hands of the employer, and there are some horror stories, as the scrutiny panel on work permits set out very clearly. There are some issues which are underlying this, not just probationary period, but worker rights that are going to have to be looked into. And if we're going to deal with the cost of living problem that we've got, we have to provide plentiful opportunities for people to employ. That means housing and all the rest of it. If we're going to deal, yesterday's debate was a lack of action on the Council of Ministers, the cost of living crisis. Well, the cost of living crisis is alive and well because the labour market isn't working. The labour market isn't working because of supply, and Jersey is, I hope, going to be quickly having a new government which is going to send out a message of stability and certainty that we're a great place to come and live and work, get good rates of pay with great jobs, great futures, and with good standards when things go wrong between the employer and the employer. So Deputy Andrews, he's actually provided useful intelligence here. I will support his proposition in the spirit in which it's made. It's a backbench proposition which looks as though there's an issue which needs to be looked into further. It shouldn't take up lots of resources. I've spoken for too long. I'll sit down. I will support the deputy because the massive issue underlying this whole issue is a problem in our employment market, of which this is one subset, but there are lots more, and I'll be supporting Deputy Andrews because he's raised an issue that's our biggest problem. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Deputy Coles.
Thank you, sir. And it's good to actually follow Deputy Joseph on his speech, though I believe he was slightly off track, but he made some very good points in the fact that we're talking about employment rights here. Now, I'm not sure if I misheard the Minister for Social Security before, or whether it's, she misspoke about the right of unfair dismissal being a day one right. It's not actually a day one right, just to be clear. It's only a day one right for discrimination, but otherwise you actually have to wait 366 days before you have the right to claim unfair dismissal. And unfortunately, this is where Deputy Andrews' proposition is unfortunately well-intended, but in the wrong direction. And actually, if this proposition was to reduce the point at which you can claim unfair dismissal from a year down to 6 months, I thought that this would be a proposition that we could fully support and fully get behind, because that would actually improve employees' rights. Unfortunately, with Deputy Andrews' proposition and the way it's worded and laid out, someone's probation period can be 6 months, 6 days. It doesn't matter, because that person can still be dismissed after 11 months and 9 days of employment with absolutely no right to actually go for any form of unfair dismissal, unless it's by discrimination. That is the only right that they would have at that point to claim anything and support their rights. So I'd like to say well done to Deputy Andrews for highlighting what he considers an issue and for bringing it for the Assembly, but unfortunately this won't achieve what he hopes it will achieve. What it might do is actually make more employers be concerned within that 6 month period and actually ruin someone's chances of improving over that next 6 months to actually prove that they are capable of the job for which they have been employed. So, sir, I will leave it there, but unfortunately, I cannot support Deputy Andrews on this one.
Does any other member wish to speak on this proposition? Deputy Rob Ward. Yes.
Sorry. My hearing is not great today. Sorry, sir. I just want to mention a couple of things. First of all, I think this is a problem that's being created that perhaps isn't there. There are some unforeseen circumstances here in limiting a probation period. There are some professions where the probation period goes on purpose, so that because that is a required need for training. And within that probation period, that training is provided. Also in areas, the area I know about is teaching, obviously. And when somebody starts in a teaching profession, that first year is the most difficult one you will ever have in the classroom. And you need significant support in that time. If you were to look at somebody after 6 months and make that judgment, you would be failing as a trainer, because there are steps. It's not a linear progression. There are steps to progression. And then they plateau and then you increase again. And that craft takes time to develop. And that's true, I think, for other areas, ambulance, fire, etc., the police in particular. So I think limiting this in a blanket way is not the way to do this. I would also say the issues around, and I want to say this because it's very important to state publicly, sir, the issues around probation, well, in a unionised workplace with experienced reps who are trained and work well with employers, a careful eye is kept on the process of using probation, and that's the way to. That is a really significant feature in protecting workers' rights. So that is one of the solutions if these problems arise. And finally, sir, Part C that was removed, I thought was the only part that was actually protective. Unfortunately, it's gone. Because if you have an illness or something happens within that 6 months, your probation period's over. That cannot be seen as fair in any shape or form. Because if you're on week 3 of your probationary period, you break your leg or something, and then you're off for a while, does that mean you've lost your job? That, I'm afraid, is Victorian work standards, and we can't do that. And so, therefore, sir, there is no way I can support this. I think it has unintended consequences, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. I close the debate and call upon Deputy Andrews to respond.
Thank you, sir. I will start with Deputy Ward, and I think he mentioned a good point about unionisation. Unionised workers happen to be protected because, of course, they are part of the union and they have somebody to support them in terms of their bargaining power. And I have certainly seen a difference, shall we say, where somebody is not unionised, they are by themselves, they have no representative that they can take with them. And in one particular case, I think it was quite evident, purely due to the fact that they were not unionised, that they were more vulnerable and they found themselves in the position that they were in the end. And of course, that was a more exacerbated issue that this individual unfortunately found themselves in. Now, I know Deputy Coles also mentioned about unfair dismissal. Now, there is nothing stopping the Deputy nor the Reform Party or even another member of bringing forward a proposition to complement the proposition that I have lodged today. Because, of course, there needs to be an update to the employment law in several areas. I think it has to be said that this is a continued area of work that surely will form part of the next Council of Ministers once we see the States Assembly be reconstituted. Deputy Ozef, he mentioned about Jersey having a very tight labour market. Now, I think there may be instances for some individuals where, say, they have a degree of specialisation. There's only maybe a few select jobs that this person can be employed within. So they cannot migrate, say, to other jobs within the economy if there is, say, full capacity in those areas. And that's maybe where we could see some workers potentially be vulnerable. But then again, maybe where there are jobs where there is a plentiful supply of vacancies, then people can transfer across. And I think that's what we are currently seeing in the labour market at the moment, where Labour is able to bargain for higher wages, because we see the level of vacancies essentially outstrip those who are, say, unemployed, and also those who are employed. They have more flexibility to move into new roles as well. I thought it was very interesting to hear from Deputy Scott, and she mentioned a pertinent point about, I guess you could say, the more business class of society. So those who are employing people and their views on, say, maximum work probation periods, and also just setting conditions in employment law in general. And I could see there was definitely a demarcation in the views from employers, for instance, and those who are, say, lower to middle class, or those who are employees. And I thought that was quite interesting just from the feedback that I got. For instance, I could see on the States Assembly website where the video was promoted, there was quite a few comments in support of the proposition on Facebook, compared to, say, Twitter, where I'd say probably more views were expressed being more antithetical to the proposition. But I think, just like Deputy Ozef said, this is, from I guess from a backbencher perspective, I am limited in terms of the resources that I have at my disposal. However, I think that the intention is there to improve the employment law, because, of course, those cases that are maybe rare, that they do exist. And I think it's more of an inconspicuous issue, because many people are frightened to stand up and to speak and say, look, this is what's happened to me. Because, again, it's drawing attention to the fact that the employer has no confidence potentially in that employee. So I think it could be quite difficult for some employees to speak about. And so, you know, there probably needs to be a broader discussion in future about this issue, because we have seen it in other jurisdictions where there is legislation in place. I looked at one website in particular, and I was trying to source the legislation from the different countries, and I really struggled because, say, I was going onto pages and it was in foreign language, so I couldn't really provide the evidence. But I did happen to come across the Netherlands and German law that was actually in English, so it made it a bit more easier for me to understand. But I understand that the Social Security Minister has outlined her position, and I happen to very much respect her, even if we maybe disagree on this occasion. But I think she's done a wonderful job in the time she has served, sir, and I'd just like to thank her for that. So I'd like to call for the appel, sir.
It's called for. Comment Officer John, do you have
could I ask for a point of clarification, please, sir?
yes, do you give way for a point of clarification?
Yes, sir.
So the Deputy said that you could only get representation if you're in a unionised environment. So there's such a thing as statutory entitlement, and that includes the right to representation from a colleague who doesn't have to be a union representative. Would you accept that, sir?
That wasn't strictly put as a point of clarification, Conotab. I think you would have needed to say, could the Deputy clarify whether, because you haven't spoken, you can't clarify something yourself, you'd have to clarify, ask the Deputy to clarify something.
It's to clarify the Deputy summing up, sir, where he spoke about non-union people, non-unionised environments couldn't be representative, sir.
Yes, I think technically you would ask the Deputy, is he able to clarify whether in non-unionised environments, you would probably put it that way, rather than saying something yourself, which is a speech after the event.
Sorry, sir.
No, it's quite all right. It's just a method of getting it done.
I can clarify, sir, if it's helpful. Yes, I'd just say, sir, regarding the Conotable of St John's inquiry about this, empirically, those workers who happen to be unionised, I find that they've probably seen better outcomes as employees if there's, say, any difficulties that need to be resolved, whereas I think those who are non-unionised workers, I think it's more difficult because, again, they don't really have a body to go to who can be that third party to support them. So, you do see cases maybe where issues are not maybe resolved as much compared to those who are unionised workers. So I hope that has answered, but if not, I am willing to clarify. Yeah.
Very well. The appel is called for? Not.
Yes, please, sir.
Yes. The appel is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on proposition. Sorry. Yes, are you taking as a whole thing or are you breaking them
I'll take
down?
it whole, sir.
Very well, they're all taken. Of course, that excludes paragraph C, which the deputy hasn't moved. So it's paragraphs A, B as amended, and D of the proposition. I invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on P103 as amended, and ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been defeated. 4 votes pour, 35 votes contra, no abstentions.
Those voting for, Deputy Labby, Ozef, Wilson and Andrews.
Very well. The final item of public business is that item which the Assembly at the beginning of the session this morning agreed to take. It is Deputy Scott's remote participation within the States Assembly for the purposes of the election of a Chief Minister or ministers, I imagine that would say. And that's P3 and, excuse me. The main, well, no, I think I just asked the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to agree in accordance with Standing Order 167 that the ruling of the bailiff dated 28th of September 2020 should be reviewed, and that further to the adoption of vote of no confidence Chief Minister P1 of 2024, any elected member absent from Jersey as a result of any travel arrangement made by that elected member prior to the date P1 of 2024 was lodged will be permitted to participate remotely in the subsequent meetings to select a Chief Minister designate and other ministers in the resultant new Council of Ministers.
Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. So I would like to thank Deputy Coles for his work in proposing that this proposition be brought forward for debate today, and to thank States members for supporting his proposition. I should also inform States members that, like the Deputy, I have a personal interest in this matter of potential unintended disenfranchisement. Hopefully, members will have read the report accompanying this proposition, which explains the standing order mechanics that currently prevent States members from attending States meetings remotely if out of the island, in the absence of a review of your ruling regarding the interpretation of P62/2002 in general situations, with an unforeseen circumstance like the current one not having been identified. As with other States members, I'm mindful of arranging my time to be able to attend state sittings and have delayed making travel arrangements until I have notice of the dates of state sittings. This is provided in the form of the schedule of states meetings the Privileges and Procedures Committee generally publishes mid-year. It's not easy for all of us to arrange family holidays around these published dates of sittings and scrutiny commitments if another family member, for example, has work commitments that make it difficult for them to take holiday during recesses or for other reasons. And in fact, I didn't succeed in taking a family holiday last year. So for that reason, as soon as I had received notice of this year's States Assembly sittings, my partner and I arranged a long-awaited break from our respective work commitments to be out of the island together. And unfortunately, for good reason, the schedule did not include notice of the meeting of the States Assembly to be held on Wednesday the 17th to elect a new Chief Minister, or the States meeting that will be convened under standing orders 2 working days after that election to elect the rest of the new Council of Ministers. And why? Because it was unforeseen. Deputy Binay's proposition P1/2004 was lodged only at the beginning of this year. And like most members, I had no prior knowledge of the timing of the proposition or its content. States members only received notice of the meeting to be held next Wednesday, which resulted from their approval of the proposition they only had received notice this week. Naturally, I'm reluctant to cancel a family holiday to attend the unforeseen States Assembly meetings in person, particularly as the travel insurance does not cover such a cancellation, and with the possibility of remote attendance being available, which is consistent, as some might say, with Jersey being a leader in digital technology, which enables me to interrupt my holiday whilst away to attend the meetings remotely. And I would be willing to attend the meetings remotely and hope that States members will grant me and other States members in a similar position to me that simple indulgence. I therefore request that the States Assembly support this proposition to grant me and the other States members who will be in a similar situation to me the indulgence of being able to interrupt our pre-arranged travel or vacation plans while out the island to join them remotely at the two state sittings to be held for the purpose of electing the next Council of Ministers as a result of the approval of the vote of no confidence. Thank you, sir.
What is the proposition seconded? Yes, sir. Any member wish to speak on the proposition? Coles.
Thank you, sir. I just thought I would stand and just to confirm again that I am another one of these interesting parties that has already had pre-arranged travel, from which we booked back in June under similar methods with Deputy Scott. It's not always time. My wife is self-employed, and so you might think that might make it a bit easier, but of course she has clients that take the time that she is available. So cancelling at short notice isn't necessarily financially viable for us, as we're not on what we consider a high salary between a lot of people either. So we also have to look to when trips away are actually the most affordable for us. So this is what we did in this instance, as PPC have had this published, like I said, 6 to 18 months in advance sometimes, depending when you're travelling. And as also, as Deputy Scott alluded, the technology now allows us to participate remotely. But what I did want to say is that this proposition does not give way to change rules within standing orders that makes remote participation when off-island allowed at all times. It is literally only speaking for this two incidents, about electing the Chief Minister, and if members are still away, to elect the ministers thereafter. I will only be away for the election of the Chief Minister, as I'm due to return on the Sunday, as that week had me completely clear. My next engagement was actually going to be for the Planning Committee on the following Tuesday, which, coming back on the Sunday, gave me the Monday as the fallover, should I need it, as I like to try and make sure I'm back on the island at least 24 hours before any state committees or any state sittings. So, sir, I do request that people members give some consideration to this proposition. It's a one-off for an extraordinary situation, and maybe then we can get things done uniformly. Thank you.
Much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes. Deputy Balch.
Sir, I have some difficulty with this proposition, I must confess. I think the election of a Chief Minister designate and election of ministers, indeed, too, are important matters, and that members should really be present in the Assembly to take part in the debate. I am not comfortable at the vision of a member sitting on a Caribbean beach with his or her telephone and participating in the debate in this Assembly. I've got great sympathy for those members who have made arrangements, and but I think that's just the way things go. If members are away because of some pressing engagement or holiday arrangements or whatever it may be, then that's the way it is. But I think the principle that members should be in the Assembly for such an important matter is overriding, and I shall not be supporting this proposition.
Is there another member, Deputy Tadian?
So I wasn't going to speak, but I think I need to put a counterpoint to that. I think it's important to to be flexible, this is effectively an internal procedure, albeit one which is of great public interest and will be highly scrutinised. And I think, therefore, the corollary to what Deputy Balash says, and I do have an element of sympathy, would be to make a different amendment, which would be that the 7-day notice period should actually be abolished, and that the elections should therefore take place at the next state sitting, for which, of course, everyone would be expected to be present. I think there's a trade-off, though, because we have 3-week sittings now, and I think a 3-week period would be seen as too long a time to do without a government for this island. So I think this is very much a practical step. I also note that actually, I'm not sure whether anyone's going to be sitting on a Caribbean beach dialing in. Good luck if you are doing that. You might need to go into the hotel. But the bottom line is that whilst members can ask questions, this isn't an opportunity for members to speak. This is very much about being able to hear and listen to all of the candidates who put themselves forward, and simply being able to vote in one or more of the rounds. And it's strange that we would want to stop somebody who wants to do their work, and that's all they need to do, to do that simply because they're away for a sitting which wasn't planned. So I think on the balance, I think this is a very simple change for a one-off purpose, which I think we can do in the 21st century because we have the technology at our fingertips, and we know through COVID that it works very well.
Thank you, sir. I'm inclined to align myself with Deputy Balash, but what I would be comfortable with is classifying those members who are unable to be present because of pre-arranged trips away to be classified as defo excuse. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak? Deputy Robwell.
So just to say, I mean, I always had a problem with off-island participation anyway. But I have to say in this case, I think the vote for the Chief Minister is something that we are expected to participate in. And it has been a 7-day notice. People have booked, and it's not as simple for some who have a very small window when they can take it. We don't work term time only. We work during holidays. We may not have sittings sometimes, but still the work continues, scrutiny continues, and work of ministers continues, etc. And so that's the one part that we have. And what this does is, and the only reason I would even dream of supporting this is because it's a one-off in this particular situation for the most important role in this assembly, one might say. And so that people's allegiance to that vote is made public. And there is a simple solution. People can listen in, and as was said, you may be able to ask questions, sir, but you can't make a speech. And so you are in listening mode for that, and then a voting mode. And also we have to say that what people are doing is saying, and it is strange that members are sat here saying, I will be on holiday, but I want to take a part of my holiday out in order to be part of this. And we do have the technology to do that. I much prefer being in the Assembly. Those of us who are here during COVID, my least favourite thing was sitting at home and being online for the Assembly. It's not a great way to do it, I recognise that, but that works, the technology's there, and it means that we're inclusive so that everybody here can be part of that Assembly. I just say as well, I think it's, in any workplace, would it be reasonable to say to somebody, you will lose the break that you've booked at a time when you were available to have a break, and everyone needs a break at some time for their well-being. You may lose a significant amount of money, it may put a significant strain in your relationship, so that you can be here for what will probably be one morning, even though we have the facility to let people vote away from here, and we could make that decision today as a one-off. I would also say, sir, and this was slightly triggered by Deputy Tadia, it's a bit of a consequence of us going to 3-week sittings. If we were still in 2-week sittings, we could have just gone to the next sitting. It would have been that, and people would not have booked their holidays. If they had booked their holidays knowing there was a sitting, then that's their own fault. But unfortunately, this time, that did not happen. People have booked things, not myself. I'm not going away at that time because we don't go away at that time. But I do feel for those who may well be voting very differently from me, and you know, it could be an advantage, but I don't think that's fair. And I think we do need to we've got the facility to respect our democracy. Let's just let this go at that time, and then PPC perhaps need to look at that and say, okay, let's look at future circumstances around the Chief Minister vote and see whether, if that comes up again in coming years, because they do seem to be fashionable, votes of no confidence, then we would know how to deal with that in future cameras. So I urge people to support this and perhaps just give a little so that people can participate fully. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Joseph.
So our oath of office says, inter alia, that we promise to attend meeting of the state whenever you are called to do so, and generally that you will fulfil the duties imposed on to you by virtue of the said office. I repeat, you will attend meetings of the state whenever called to do so. And these are exceptional times. We have a government that has fallen. This is a debating assembly, and we should be here present to do that. A number of meetings have been cancelled because the government has fallen. In my case, external relations meetings with UK parliamentarians, they have all been cancelled, and I will be here. And I think that there is a whole issue about out of office working. The only exception should be if you're ill, and we also pledge an allegiance. We have to, when somebody's ill, we do an oath, sir, that says that you, in French, that we will expose our, and then you can't vote if you're ill. Maybe that there is an issue that somebody's ill, and I know that there's a couple of members online who are ill because they have COVID, or they're ill and they don't want to transmit that infection. They should be able to vote, but people who have booked a holiday, I think, are required to be here. These are exceptional times. We're a debating assembly, and I'm afraid that we need to put our oath of office front and centre and be here for that vote, sir.
So may I ask a question of the Attorney General?
What's the question now?
I'm glad it's being vetted first, sir. But the question is to do with what the Deputy Joseph just said. With the oath of office, of course, we're required to attend meetings of the States Assembly, but is it correct that attending virtually can also be considered attending this Assembly? And this is exactly what the proposition would enable from a legal point of view.
It's a matter of interpretation of standing orders, isn't it?
I mean, I can ask you, sir.
In fact, the oath, it's a matter of interpreting the oath, and I'm not sure it's a legal question as such. If it is, it seems to me, part of the oath of office, I apologise for my coughing and inability to speak. If it is part of the oath of office that members have to attend the meeting, then they must attend the meeting in the form that the Assembly itself agrees amounts to attending the meeting, because the Assembly controls its own procedure. That seems to me, it is not prescribed in statute, and it would be open in theory for the Assembly to create standing orders in which all attendances were remote in all circumstances. So it seems to me that that is the correct interpretation of the oath of office. That's not to say, and I make no observation as to a view on it, whether philosophically that was what was intended when the oath of office was first drafted and members have taken it. But that's a different question. In terms of wording, that's my interpretation of it.
Thanks. So could I ask you further to clarify that, in fact, in the past, that has been the definition because members have attended remotely and they've been considered to have attended the meeting?
Well, members are attending remotely now, and they're voting now. They happen to be doing it from within the island in accordance with the ruling that I gave on the interpretation of the standing order at that time. But yes, they are doing so now, and so therefore they've done it in the past. And we are all fully aware that members attended on a number of occasions during COVID, but from a remote point of view. Very well. Deputy Stevenson.
Thank you, sir. I'm uncomfortable with this proposition currently, and I want to explain to members why that is, and hopefully draw attention to some of the issues there, because if I just ask members to cast their minds back to when PPC brought a proposal to the Assembly to discuss remote working for future, actually I was really quite shocked and surprised at some of the contributions that were made by members in that debate, and particularly around parental caring responsibilities. And it surprised me that actually we were going back to in what is my mind, a more conservative way of thinking that is less open to those kind of flexible working arrangements. And I think, if I'm recalling correctly, we didn't achieve any consensus on the way forward on that matter, and PPC were going to go away and do some more work on it. And I certainly came out of that discussion not feeling like we had agreed on a way forward, which is why I am uncomfortable in this situation, because yes, it is different, yes, it is an exceptional circumstance, but also it creates precedent towards something that we didn't agree on in that discussion around a number of very real issues. And I just wanted really to put on record that that's the thoughts that are going through my mind at the moment. Whatever way the vote goes today, I obviously don't want to inconvenience fellow members. I absolutely appreciate that people have the right to make plans and have holidays, absolutely. And we know that there are members in here today who know that more than others as well. And so really that's my thoughts on it. I would make a request that members remember what they've said or thought today when we do return to that matter of remote participation as well, and discussions around, as I come back to the parental responsibilities. You know, I remember members saying things like, you know, I'd question if people are able to care for their children and to contribute as well, or to listen in as well. And I'd say that's a judgment for those members as well. There are a lot of things to unpick in these kind of discussions, and I think that perhaps it's not as clear-cut as it's being made out today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And of course, Deputy Balash is absolutely right. The election of Chief Minister and Ministers is really, really important. Members have to decide whether it's important enough that they sit here and we lose a few votes, or whether it's important enough that we have every vote counted, and those people who unexpectedly find themselves off island are able to vote. I'm concerned about remote attendance, and I make no bones about it. Currently, members can vote if they're sick. They don't appear to be able to vote if they're on holiday. It might sound like a joke. If you fall sick on holiday and apply for a vote, what's the answer? Sir, to be serious again, next week is unforeseen. It is really important. It's clear that there's a lot of work and thought that needs to go into a fair system for remote attendance if we are going to have it. I would, for myself, vote in favour of today's proposition, but charge PPC to come back. I know they're doing work on it, and I can't say I'm happy about the propositions they're coming forward with. There's a debate to be had. But maybe for next week, we can agree it is unforeseen. Members who are away should be able to vote, but that in the fairly near future, let's get some rules in place about remote working, whether it's sickness, whether it's childcare, whether it's holiday, whether it's appointments in the UK for medical reasons. People could be away for medical reasons next week. They may have organised, as I've done in the past, to attend medical appointments between state sittings. That seems a bit unfair on them. But for today, for this issue, next week, I will vote in favour, but let's get some proper rules in place about who and where can vote remotely. Thank you, sir.
It's a matter for members, but it occurs to me that it might be helpful to the Assembly as a whole if members who are likely to take advantage of this as proposition, if it's passed, could indicate at this point. So we're talking in effect about possibly 5 votes. Then in that case, 5 individuals. So that just gives people an indication of the scale of the way that the meeting might obtain. Very much indeed. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Alves.
Thank you, sir. I just wanted to address a couple of things that have been said. I think nobody here wants to set a precedent for anything, and I think that argument can be used for anything, basically, and that's why PPC was quite clear in saying that, you know, by supporting this, we don't want to set the precedent. That's not what this is about. This is about unforeseen circumstances, and I think we have to understand that this role is very different. If you were in a normal workplace, you wouldn't have something like this crop up, where you would all of a sudden have to cancel all your plans or whatever. And I just want to also mention things like affordability. Now, if people have saved up to go on holiday and things like that, not everybody has another income outside of this role. And I'm not one of those people that will be affected by this, but I will give you a personal example. I've gone from a 2-income household to a 1-income household. My mortgage has gone up by 40%. This is the only income I have aside from maybe a little bit of tutoring that I can do here and there. For me to be able to even save up to go on holiday is quite a mean feat, and not all travel insurance companies would cover the cost of having to be called back to work. So I think we really need to bear that in mind, sir. I know that Deputy Luce was making a joke about being ill on holiday, but I do just want to draw people's attention to standing orders, and that actually if you are off island, whether you are ill or not, you cannot apply for the Teams link. So I just wanted to clarify that as well. So, sir, I think, you know, in this instance, I am uncomfortable about people being off island. I do think there are circumstances where we should be accommodating to people. Another example I will give you was that in 2022, my grandma in Madeira was very ill. She was dying of cancer. And we were still very much remote working at that time. In fact, we were fully remote, but because I could have probably got away with it, but because I'm not like that, I'm very honest, I was going back to Madeira for 2 weeks and then paying to come back again for the week where we were sitting, even though we were completely electronic, to then pay to go back again to see my grandma for another 2 weeks to come back again. And I did that for about 3 sittings. That was at quite a big cost, financial cost to me. But I knew that my grandmother was going to die, ultimately. But in between those, you know, when I was there for those 2 weeks, I was able to tune in to my other meetings. And in fact, I think I was PPC chair at the time as well. And I was able to successfully chair meetings online. So I do think we have to be really mindful that there will be circumstances where this is acceptable. But like everybody else, I wouldn't want to encourage it just for anything. So I hope I've given members some food for thought for those people that may be considering voting against this, to just think again and think about if you were in one of those circumstances, how would you feel? Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? I apologise, yes, Deputy Gardner, you did it again.
Thank you, sir. The members who were in the previous assembly probably remember that I brought a proposition in April 22, which was on the back that unforeseen circumstances, if something happened, if travel was delayed, or I was in London with COVID, couldn't go in, and I couldn't bring the proposition for the Ukrainian crisis, the war that started at the time. And I remember that I have been supported by the Assembly, but, and this is why I'm trying to see how we progress forward, because I do believe we need to allow remote participation, and I've been very clear in 2022. In 2023, the Privilege and Procedures Committee, PPC, was requested to bring forward amendments to standing order to enact this decision. The decision was made in April 22. This decision hasn't been officially enacted, and we are in January 24. Whatever decision we are making, when it's coming back, it's really important to reflect, because I cannot see any difference between somebody who, because of the travel disruption, couldn't be in the assembly and represent their constituency to somebody that we have emergency meeting and plan the holiday. And it's okay. From my perspective, I don't have any problem, but really important that we'll stop saying the holiday in vote of no confidence, it's okay, but to represent your constituent in the assembly if the flights were cancelled because of the snow, it's not okay. So it's really important that we will be consistent. This is my point.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Conor Tarperson, one.
Thank you, sir. So the code says that you are to attend when called to do so. The members, though, are not going to be here, want to attend the meeting, the assembly, and all they're doing is just asking permission from the members here to be able to do so. I don't really see what the problem is.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? No other member wishes to speak. Then I close the debate and call upon Deputy Scott to respond.
I thank members for their various contributions, which raised some interesting points and some interesting perspectives. So just going through these, Deputy Balash, well, thank you, Deputy Tadje, for actually addressing, thank you, Deputy Tadje, for returning to the room, and for addressing this point that was raised about the possibility of one of these members who had made previous arrangements be away, dining in from a beach with cocktail. I don't really think that is practically how anybody can attend a states meeting. Personally, I would expect them to be booking a meeting room, attending from a hotel room, and seriously, that is not a way to spend a holiday for most people. It actually is a sign of commitment to actually suggest if, say, for example, that they are actually spending a week with family and that they should give that all up to attend the assembly for a day when, in fact, other people who might be ill in the island can attend. I'm sorry, I feel that shows a lack of compassion. And I very regret having to mention that the deputy himself has been absent from states meetings himself to accompany a relative or to be because of family reasons. I would not have had a personal problem if he'd actually dialed in. Were he in the unfortunate situation, which I hope he never will be, of accompanying a relative to Southampton because they were there for oncology reasons and actually wanted to dial in. I would also like to point out to him, because I know he has a legal background, that there are certainly human rights I haven't really gone into, but one of them is to do with family time. There are others to do with disenfranchisement. So I feel rather disappointed that this particular deputy has actually taken this position. And I note that Constable Jackson appeared persuaded, and I hope that he might reconsider his position. I also will point out that for all this thing about the interpretation of the oath, and I do believe that Deputy Tadje raised the fair point that, yes, a Deputy Osef has now gone out the room, but he was the one who, Chambers, sorry, sir, who raised the issue that, yes, we have an oath to attend states meetings, and that has been extended by virtue of Deputy Gardner's work and with the States Assembly's agreement to remote attendance. And I would like to point out to states members, because it does seem quite extraordinary, that I not only attended the states a states meeting remotely when I was unwell with COVID, because I had that level of commitment, but I also stood and gave a speech to actually in challenge for the chair of the Economics and International Affairs panel. And I was actually supported by the States Assembly in this position. Now, I really don't think, and this is a fair point, yeah, maybe I could have been away on holiday and been ill on it. What difference would it actually have made to you? I'm sorry, sir, to the members. So I hope now, Deputy Stevenson has raised this issue, as has Deputy Gardner, and I actually agree. There was this debate about the possibility of working a little bit more with Deputy Gardner's proposition and the circumstances in which one might attend remotely. I was supportive of the idea that that might be done to support those who perhaps had childcare issues or other caring issues. And of course, that did get rejected by the states. But I remember, because people just were not, members just weren't actually comfortable with this idea about allowing this generally without knowing the circumstances. And in fact, I do remember, because I've actually got quite a good memory, usually, that the Constable of St Saviour raised this very question of the chair of the PPC. He said, "What do you mean by unforeseen circumstances?" And I remember a response, because I kind of half chuckled to it, because she said, "I don't know, because they're unforeseen." Well, here we go. We've now got an example that nobody thought about or even raised at the time. So for that reason, here is an example, and I do agree that there could be potential in the future to actually say, well, maybe that standing order might be, or the proposition of the standing orders be refined for a particular circumstance like that. But we don't even need to do this. We only need to look at the situation in hand, what has happened, the actual human rights elements, if you actually care about that sort of thing, the compassion elements, the fact that you do have members of the States Assembly who have had difficulties arranging time with family, have got that commitment to attend remotely. The technology is there. It would be available for anybody in the island were they unwell or anything, under standing orders anyway. And I therefore urge and request members, please support this proposition to show compassion and logic in this particular situation, and not be accused of anything such as potential spite or anything else. Thank you very much. Sorry, I call for the appel.
As called for, invite members to return to their seats. The vote is on P3, remote participation for the purposes of the election of the Chief Minister and Ministers. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. Members have had the opportunity of casting their vote. Then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been adopted. 38 votes pour, 5 votes contre, 1 abstention.
You have the 5 and the 1, please.
Those voting contre, the Connétable of St Brelard and St Saviour, Deputy Ayer, Balash and Andrews, and Deputy Stevenson abstained.
Well, that concludes public business. I invite the Chair of PPC to propose the arrangements for future business. I might at this point remind members that the next sitting will be on Thursday next, the 25th of January, for the purpose of election of a new Chief Minister designate. Very well, Chair.
Thank you, sir.
PPC.
The arrangement of public business, as the bailiff has just said, the next meeting of the Assembly will be on Thursday, the 25th of January at 9:30 for the purpose of electing Chief Minister. But please keep Friday, the 26th of January free in case the election goes into 2 days. So I make the proposal.
Very well. Do members agree to the proposal made by the Chair of PPC? Very well. That concludes the business of the Assembly, and we stand adjourned until 9:30 a.m. on the 25th of January.